Welcome back to part 5 of our live training session here with our 2004 Pontiac GTO. In the last few videos, we went from our base map calibration process to getting the engine idle control and starting sorted out to the part throttle cruising operation and the wide open throttle in our very last video. So now we have everything calibrated within our main tables. Now we're going to be taking a look at day 2 of the calibration process where we let the vehicle cool down overnight. We're going to be looking at the cold start and the warm-up procedure and making sure that we have both the cranking fuel right, the after start fuel, and our ECT warm-up enrichment tables proper so that we deliver the proper air fuel and the engine's going to be performing how we'd expect. We're going to have a lot of things to cover in this video. Let's jump in so we can check everything out. Welcome back to our live training session here with our 2004 Pontiac GTO. In our last video, we learned how to do our wide open throttle calibration techniques for fuel and our spark timing. We've dialed that in on this vehicle, so at this point, our idle part throttle and wide open throttle are nailed down on a warm engine. So we're going to be taking a look now in this video on day 2 of our live training session here. We've let the engine sit overnight. We need to go and take a look at the fuel and spark timing demands that we need to have in place to allow the engine to run properly, to crank and fire from a cold state. So in this configuration right now, the engine is going to need more fuel. We're going to find on a cold engine, the fuel doesn't atomize as it does on a warm engine. It's going to have poor atomization. That means the fuel's not going to get into the engine as easily. We need to have more fuel being pumped through the fuel injector to make the engine run properly and have the engine be happy when it's warming up and not run too lean or too rich. And in this case, it would be too lean if we didn't have any kind of warm-up enrichment or any kind of additional post-start enrichment. So we're going to be taking a look at our cranking fuel, making sure the engine cranks up and fires, making sure that we have proper post-start enrichment. That's going to be where we add the fuel for the first maybe 5, 10, 20 seconds after it's fired off. And then as it's coming up to operating temperature, more of the long-term operation, that's going to be our warm-up enrichment, so that we have the proper amount of fuel being delivered and the air fuel is going to be falling in line to what we have for the target. A couple tables we need to look at here. So it's going to be cranking fuel, after start or post start fuel, depending on how you want to call it. And then we have our warm-up enrichment. We need to look at those fuel related tables. We also need to take a look at our idle control at the same time, because our idle control is going to play a role in allowing the engine to fire up and run. We know on a warm engine, the engine cranks up and it fires up and it runs and it holds the appropriate target RPM that we're programming in our idle control, but now we're going to have a higher target RPM for it to meet. So we're going to be taking a look at that here real quick. I'll go through the tables we need to recognize and just understand how they're going to be interrelating, and then we'll go through, fire up the engine, make sure it's going to be fire up and running. We're going to take a data log. We can play back the data log and then go through the key areas of what we need to look for and things that we potentially need to go and modify and change based on what the data is showing us in our data log. It's actually pretty simple to sort out your cold start, but we'll go through that process again so you can see it from start to finish here. So let's jump in here and let's talk about this real quick. We have our base fuel table. The base fuel table represents the fuel amount for an engine that's came up to operating temperature. So we need to add fuel additional to the base fuel table so again we can overcome the poor atomization as the engine is warming up. That's where we have our tables down here that come into play here. So under temp enrichment, we're going to have our coolant temp enrichment. So the coolant temp enrichment is also known as warm-up enrichment on a lot of other standalone systems. This is going to be applying a certain percentage of additional fuel so the engine can fire up and run. If we're taking a look here, right now, I'm online with my ECU, I'm live with my Terminator X. We can see the coolant temp is showing about 87 degrees, manifold air temp showing roughly 83. It is pretty warm in the garage right now. It's summertime. The ambient temperature is getting over 100 degrees during the day. So we're seeing that already here in the morning. It is relatively warm. But what we're going to find here, if we're looking at our table, we're going to be operating between 80 and 100 in our coolant temp reference. And we'll be adding in here between 120 to 115% enrichment based on the current coolant temp operating scale or operating range that we're in right now. So it's going to be adding this as it fires up and it runs. And we're going to see as it starts to transition here, as our coolant temperature picks up at roughly 160, it zeroes out any of the warm-up enrichment. It goes then into whatever the base fuel table values we've determined are going to be. So we're going to find, essentially we turn off our coolant temp enrichment or the warm-up enrichment at that range. So we're going to consider 160 and warmer to be up to operating temperature. Now, thing to know about this, the closed loop correction can still work. That's our short-term adjustment. The learn will not work until the values are 0 in our coolant temp enrichment table here. So keep that in mind. No learning will take place. It'll only be our short-term correction in our closed loop enrichment that we've talked about pretty heavily here. Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here. And you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.